I didn't plan to become an entrepreneur. I didn't even know what the word really meant until I was halfway through burning my savings and sleeping on a half-deflated air mattress in the back of my office/apartment. The story starts 5 years ago. I was working a pretty normal job at a regional marketing agency. I wasn't in love with it, but it paid well enough. The people were okay, and I could coast if I wanted. And for the most part, I did. I was comfortable. Bored, but comfortable. Everything shifted when I took a side project helping a friend of a friend set up an online store for their handmade dog collars. It was nothing glamorous, Shopify template, some SEO tweaking, basic ad campaigns, but it was the first time I saw how raw and immediate small business could be. They started making sales within a week, and I felt a weird kind of pride. Not just for helping them make money, but for building something with my own hands that actually worked. That same month, I got chewed out by a middle manager for using too much initiative on a campaign I wasn't technically assigned to. I remember sitting at my desk thinking, if I can help some Etsy tier shop make money in a weekend, why the hell am I getting yelled at by a guy named Greg for doing extra? So I quit. Just like that. 2 weeks notice, then I was out. No plan, barely any savings, and a wildly inflated sense of how easy it would be to freelance full-time. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. I thought clients would roll in. I thought having former agency strategist on my LinkedIn would open doors. Instead, I got ghosted, underbid by people on Fiverr, and straight up ignored. The first 3 months, I made less money than I had since my college barista job. But I didn't go back. Pride? Maybe. Or maybe it was something deeper. I didn't want my entire career to be sitting in glass-walled meetings trying to pretend to care about email open rates. So I pivoted. I took every gig I could find. Local restaurants, personal trainers, real estate agents, a guy who wanted a website to sell luxury umbrellas. It flopped, obviously. Every project taught me something. What worked? What didn't? How to listen instead of pitch. How to price based on value, not hours. It was during one of these random gigs, a small job helping a tattoo artist set up online bookings, that I hit on the idea that would change everything. See, this guy, Jason, had an Instagram with over 60K followers but still booked appointments through DMs. He was losing clients left and right because he couldn't keep up. No calendar, no intake forms, no deposits. I built him a custom system for $800 and he was over the moon. Said it saved him hours every week. Next week, he referred me to 2 more artists. I did the same setup for them. Then 5 more reached out. I started thinking, why am I building custom setups every time? What if I made a product? I sketched out a rough prototype of a simple booking platform tailored specifically for independent tattoo artists. Most booking tools were bloated, ugly, and expensive. Mine would be clean, simple, mobile first, and priced fairly. I called it InkLink. Version 1 was a mess. It was just a duct-taped web app built with no-code tools, and I handled support via email, my personal Gmail account, no less. But artists loved it. Even the janky version. They loved that it looked good on mobile, that they could collect deposits, and that clients could attach references. I started charging $29 per month. Within 6 months, I had 400 users. I hired my first dev on Upwork to help stabilize the back end. He was from Croatia and became a close friend, shout out to Luka. Things snowballed. We added more features, artist portfolios, text reminders, auto deposit for cancellations. I stopped doing freelance gigs and focused full-time on InkLink. Every new feature came directly from user requests. But the biggest turning point came when we launched a feature I almost didn't build, waitlists. See, most artists book out months in advance. If a client cancels, the slot often goes empty unless the artist manually DMs someone. We automated it. The moment someone cancels, the system texts the next person on the waitlist. Artists started calling it a money printer. Retention spiked. Churn dropped to nearly 0. We crossed 2,000 paying users. Then 5,000. At $29 per month, it was real revenue. Not VC-level unicorn stuff, but enough to build a real team. I stopped doing support emails at 3 a.m. and hired someone better than me at it. We built native apps. Partnered with supply stores. Opened an affiliate program for artists to refer other artists. 3 years in, InkLink was doing over $1.8 million ARR. We were profitable, growing steadily, and completely bootstrapped. People started sniffing around. A few smaller competitors wanted to collaborate, poach my roadmap. One mid-sized software firm sent an acquisition feeler. I ignored most of it. I wasn't interested in cashing out yet. But then a bigger name came through, one of the major scheduling platforms. They saw what we'd done in a niche they hadn't cracked and offered a buyout. The number was a lot, more than I ever imagined seeing in one place. But I wasn't ready to let go. I countered with a ridiculous number, half expecting them to walk away. They didn't. After months of back and forth, due diligence, and one existential crisis, the deal closed. It wasn't 9 figures or anything insane, but it was enough to take care of my family, invest in some wild ideas, and buy back my time. I still work with them part-time as a product advisor, mostly because I like the team and I still believe in the mission. But I finally sleep in a bed that doesn't deflate, I get to travel, and I've started mentoring a few other bootstrapped founders trying to carve their own paths. Looking back, the whole thing feels surreal. I didn't start with a grand vision or a 10-year plan. I just kept solving one problem at a time, learning fast, and staying close to my users. If you're out there thinking of starting something, but you're paralyzed because you don't have a big idea, just start smaller. Help someone with something annoying. Then help 10 more people with the same thing. That's how it begins. That's how it began for me. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. Back in 2019, I had just turned 30, and I was already burned out. I had spent the last 8 years working at a marketing agency in Chicago, climbing the ranks from a clueless intern to a mid-level account manager. On paper, it looked like I had made it. I had a decent salary, a downtown apartment, and the illusion of upward mobility. In reality, I was stressed 24/7, working weekends, and basically doing 2 people's jobs. Worst part? I was making other people rich. I had always wanted to start something of my own, but I didn't have a big idea. I thought entrepreneurs had to be visionaries, like Elon Musk, but with better PR. But then, something clicked during one of our campaigns for a small e-commerce client. They sold custom dog collars, and their whole system was a mess. No automation, all manual orders. They were printing labels by hand, emailing tracking numbers, and managing inventory on a shared Google Sheet. And yet, they were pulling in $30,000 a month. That's when I realized the business didn't have to be genius. It just had to be real. I started doing freelance marketing work on the side for small e-commerce stores, mostly out of frustration. These people didn't know how to retarget, how to write ad copy, how to structure an email flow. So I started helping them. At first, it was just nights and weekends, maybe $300 for setting up a MailChimp sequence. But word spread. I made a basic Squarespace site, called myself Harbor Growth, and tried to look more legit than I was. By mid-2020, COVID hit, and everything changed. Suddenly, every brick-and-mortar store was trying to go online. My freelance inquiries doubled overnight. My job was now a massive liability to my time. I gave myself a 6-month runway. If I could make $5,000 per month on my own for 6 months straight, I'd quit. I hit that target in 3. So I quit. No plan B. At first, it was mostly client work. I was basically a one-man growth agency. But the feast or famine cycle was brutal. One client ghosting you could ruin your month. That's when I started thinking about productized services. One of my clients ran a Shopify store selling home decor. She asked if I could set up SMS marketing for her. I had no idea how to do it, but I said yes, then Googled my way through it. It worked insanely well. Her abandoned cart recovery rate jumped 30% with just 3 messages. That's when the light bulb hit again. What if I package this? So I built a tiny productized service called TextJet, just SMS flows for Shopify stores. I launched with a 1-page site for $199 for a setup and a basic onboarding form. I cold emailed 200 Shopify stores, got 4 responses, 2 sales. The margins were fantastic. I had built reusable templates, so I could set up a full flow in a couple of hours. 6 months in, I was making around $10,000 per month, half from TextJet, half from random growth projects. I hired a part-time VA to help with outreach and admin, and eventually found a freelancer to help me build flows. I wasn't rich, but I was finally breathing. Then came the biggest pivot. A store owner I worked with asked if I could build a simple dashboard to show her how her SMS was performing. I wasn't technical, but I had learned some basic Airtable plus Zapier tricks. I cobbled together a basic dashboard that showed conversion rates, click-throughs, and revenue attribution. She was blown away. She said, "I wish Klaviyo did this." That was the moment I stopped being a freelancer and started thinking like a founder. I spent the next 3 months researching. There were tools that did this, but they were either expensive, clunky, or required a developer. I hired a dev on Upwork and pitched him on a scrappy MVP. We called it Pulse and built it in 3 months. It was ugly, but it worked. It connected to your SMS provider, pulled campaign data, and showed results in a clean dashboard. No fluff. I emailed every client I'd ever worked with and offered them free access. 10 of them joined. 3 asked if they could pay me to keep using it. By 2022, Pulse had 50 paying users at $29 per month. Not huge, but validation. I raised my price to $49 per month. Churn was low. Users were sending me feature requests weekly. It was time to double down. I stopped doing freelance entirely and focused on Pulse. I brought the dev on full-time as a contractor, built an onboarding flow, and started running paid ads, Facebook and LinkedIn mostly. I created a free trial funnel, offered onboarding support, and even recorded tutorial videos using Loom. By early 2023, we hit 500 users. I was making more money than I ever had at the agency. The best part? It was recurring, predictable, scalable. I wasn't trading hours for dollars anymore. Then I got my first acquisition email. It was from a mid-sized SaaS company in the e-commerce analytics space. They were interested in Pulse and wanted to chat. I played it cool but had no idea what I was doing. I asked a founder friend to help me navigate. We didn't even talk numbers until the 3rd call, and when we did, they offered $650,000. I was stunned. Pulse was profitable, and I knew it could grow more, but I also knew I was tired. Running a SaaS solo, doing support, marketing, and roadmap planning was draining. I negotiated the deal to include a 6-month transition contract and a small earnout based on user growth. I signed the deal in August 2023. I'd made more in that 1 year than the previous 5 combined. Since then, I've been consulting part-time and working on a new idea. Can't help it, once you start. But the biggest lesson I learned? You don't need a billion-dollar idea. You don't need to invent AI 2.0. You just need to solve a real problem for real people in a way they can pay you for. If you're stuck waiting for the perfect idea, stop. Start with the boring stuff. Fix a spreadsheet. Automate a workflow. Answer the question no one else has time to. And keep going. You don't need to be a genius. Just a little obsessed. This all started with a burrito and a panic attack. I was 28, unemployed, had $1,293 in my checking account, and was lying on the floor of my studio apartment because the weight of my career. Decisions had finally punched me in the chest like a drunken kangaroo. Let's rewind a bit. I used to work in product management at a mid-sized SaaS company. Decent pay, soul-crushing meetings, and more circle-back emails than any human should ever have to send. 3 years in, they restructured, and I got the boot along with 40 others. I thought, no big deal. I'll freelance, maybe start something. It'll be fine. Spoiler, it was not fine. After 3 months of freelancing, which was mostly just me refreshing LinkedIn and telling people I was exploring opportunities, I realized I'd basically burned through half my savings on cold brew and networking. Events where no one had any jobs to offer. It all culminated one Tuesday afternoon with a burrito that hit my stomach like a brick and a panic attack that convinced me I was dying. That's when I decided to do the dumbest and best thing I've ever done. I launched a business. Sort of. The idea came from my friend Jasmine, who's a graphic designer. She kept complaining about how annoying it was to find good mockups for her client work, like device mockups, branding templates, packaging stuff. It's all either overpriced, outdated, or buried in some sketchy Google Drive from 2014, she said. Lightbulb. What if I created a centralized site for modern, high-quality design mockups, all made by verified designers and sold on a revenue share model? Basically, the Etsy of mockups. I could build the platform. I had enough product experience. Jasmine could help recruit early creators. Easy, right? LMAO. First, I had to convince someone to build it. I had basic coding skills, but not nearly enough to build a scalable marketplace. After pitching the idea to 2 dev friends who laughed but politely declined, I ended up on Upwork, where I found a Romanian developer named Alex who charged $22 per hour and had surprisingly good reviews. Alex was a godsend. We worked out a super stripped-down MVP. upload/download functionality, Stripe integration, profiles for creators. No fancy UI, no tagging system, just enough to test. I paid him $860 to build the first version. Then came the hard part, getting creators to join. I reached out to 50 designers on Instagram, Behance, and Dribble. Literally cold DMs like, "Hey, I'm building a site for designers to sell modern mockups with a 70/30 rev split. No listing fees. Want to be a founding creator?" Got ignored by 42. But 8 said yes. Jasmine was the 9th. She convinced another 4. Suddenly, we had 13 creators and around 40 mockup products. I named the site MockPop. We launched on a random Thursday at 2 a.m. because I couldn't sleep and Alex had just pushed the final updates. I posted it on Product Hunt, Designer News, Reddit, and some Slack groups I'd been lurking in. That first day, we got 314 visitors and made $126. I cried. I wish I could say it all blew up from there. It didn't, but it was something. The next few months were a slog. Every day I woke up, sent DMs to designers, answered emails, fixed bugs with Alex, who, at this point, was basically my co-founder even though he never agreed to be one, and kept trying to grow the catalog. Revenue trickled in. $300 one week, $740 the next. A dry spell where we only made $80 in a week. But then something wild happened. A YouTuber with 200K subs made a tutorial on branding mockups and used one of ours. We did $3,142 in sales that week. That's when I knew this could work. So I doubled down. I spent $500 on Reddit ads targeted at design subreddits. They actually converted. I built an onboarding flow that rewarded new creators with higher rev share for their first 90 days. We hit 100 creators, then 200. Jasmine helped me design some templates of our own, which became bestsellers. I convinced Alex to become CTO and gave him 10% equity. By month 10, we were doing $9,000 per month in revenue. Not huge, but real. Then Adobe reached out. They were launching a new plugin marketplace and wanted to feature some of our mockups. It wasn't a paid deal, but they gave us front-page visibility. We prepped for the influx, made sure our hosting wouldn't crash, and cleaned up the UI finally. When the listing went live, traffic spiked 5x overnight. We hit $26,000 in revenue that month. I quit door dashing. Yes, I'd been doing that on weekends to keep afloat, bought a second-hand Herman Miller chair like a true tech bro, and told my parents I was officially running a startup. They still think I sell printer ink. Fast forward to now, MockPop is doing $58,000 per month in revenue. We have 200 plus creators, 000 plus mockups, and we just hired a part-time content manager. We're bootstrapped, profitable, and weirdly, I actually enjoy what I do. The best part? We now sponsor that YouTuber who used our mockup in the first place. Full circle. Moral of the story? Most ideas sound dumb until they aren't. Your first version will suck. People will ignore you. But if you keep showing up, every damn day, you might just accidentally build something real. Also, don't eat gas station burritos while spiraling about your future. Just trust me on that one. I never thought I'd be the guy who built $1 million company out of his mom's basement, but here we are. The journey was chaotic, filled with caffeine, late nights, and more imposter syndrome than I care to admit. I've never told the whole story in one go, so buckle up. This one's a ride. It started in 2019. I had just dropped out of college. Not because I had a brilliant startup idea or some world-changing vision. I dropped out because I was broke, uninspired, and I hated what I was studying, business administration, ironically. I was back in my hometown, working part-time at a gas station, living with my mom, and spending most of my free time online. The catalyst came in the form of a broken laptop. My ancient Dell finally gave out, and I couldn't afford to replace it. Out of desperation, I posted on a local Facebook group asking if anyone had a laptop they wanted to get rid of. An older guy messaged me saying he had one that sorta works, and I could have it for $20. It was a beat-up ThinkPad, ran hotter than a pizza oven, but it booted. I spent the next few weeks just tinkering. I'd always had a thing for fixing electronics, and I wondered if I could flip old laptops. I found another junker on Craigslist, fixed it, and sold it for a $40 profit. Rinse and repeat. Before I knew it, I was making $300 to $400 a week. But here's where things got interesting. Around this time, I stumbled across a Reddit thread where someone mentioned making bank by flipping Chromebook carts from schools that were offloading them in bulk. Lightbulb moment. I started cold emailing local school districts, asking if they had any old tech they were getting rid of. Most ignored me, but one tech director from a tiny school 40 minutes away replied. They had 20 old Dell Chromebooks they were retiring, $20 each. I drove out the next day with my last $400. I cleaned them up, replaced a few keyboards, and listed them in a few homeschooling Facebook groups. Sold out in a week. That was the turning point. I realized the money wasn't just in flipping. It was in sourcing where no one else was looking. Over the next year, I built relationships with over 40 schools, offering to buy their used tech in bulk. I even built a janky little website to make myself look more legit. Shout out to Wix. I called the business Rebooted. By mid-2020, I was clearing $10,000 per month in profit. I had turned the basement into a workshop. My mom was surprisingly cool about it, even though there were boxes of laptops and chargers spilling into the laundry room. I hired my cousin to help me with repairs and logistics. We shipped from the basement, labeled everything with a Dymo printer from eBay, and answered customer emails from a Gmail account that made us sound bigger than we were. But success is never a straight line. In late 2020, one of my biggest suppliers, a charter school network that accounted for 40% of my inventory, decided to start recycling their devices with a national vendor. Overnight, I lost nearly half my supply chain. I panicked. My first instinct was to slash prices and run ads to keep the cash flow going. That backfired hard. I burned through $6,000 in Facebook ads that brought in barely $2,000 in sales. I almost gave up. But in that chaos, I remembered something I had overlooked. One of the schools had mentioned they didn't just get rid of Chromebooks. They had smartboards, projectors, routers. I started asking about other tech. Suddenly, I was buying lots that included 10 routers here, 15 Yellamo document cameras there. I had no idea what half of it was, but there were buyers. I began listing on niche marketplaces, GovDeals, Liquidation.com, even eBay International. It turned out that schools in the Philippines, India, and Nigeria were hungry for older education tech. I partnered with a freight forwarder who handled the overseas logistics, and just like that, Rebooted pivoted. By 2021, I moved out of the basement and into a 1,200 square foot warehouse. It felt surreal. I hired 3 part-time employees and finally paid myself a salary. $3,000 per month felt like winning the lottery. My cousin, who stuck with me since the basement days, became head of operations. Then, in mid-2022, we hit our first $1 million in revenue. We threw a party with pizza and store-brand soda in the warehouse. Nothing fancy, but in that moment, surrounded by boxes, cables, and beat-up tech, I felt something I'd never felt before. Damn proud. Since then, we've diversified even more. We now help schools sell their own tech instead of buying it outright. We take a cut of the sale, handle logistics, and they get better returns. That opened the door to working with school districts in 6 states. Last year, Rebooted hit $2.3 million in revenue with a 17% profit margin. Here's the thing though, I still don't feel like I made it. I still have nightmares about inventory drying up, about shipping delays ruining a big order, about accidentally ordering 200 Chromebooks that don't power on. Happened once. It was a rough week. But I've learned that being an entrepreneur isn't about certainty. It's about movement. You keep going, even if you're limping. If you're sitting in a basement right now, doubting yourself, wondering if your random skill or dumb idea could be something more, I'm telling you, it can. You don't need to be in Silicon Valley. You don't need a VC. You don't need a fancy degree. You need grit, Wi-Fi, and a reason to keep going when it sucks. And sometimes, a $20 ThinkPad can change your whole life. My journey as an entrepreneur didn't begin with a flash of inspiration or $1 million idea. It started with a single, rather small decision that snowballed into something I never could have anticipated. Let me take you back to the beginning. I was 23, fresh out of college, and trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I had a degree in marketing, but I wasn't interested in working for a corporation. I didn't want to climb the corporate ladder or fit into any predetermined molds. I'd always been a bit of a rebel when it came to conventional career paths. My friends and family were all pushing me towards safe options, working for a big company, getting a stable job with benefits, all the typical stuff. But I couldn't shake this feeling that there was more to life than just punching in and out every day. So, I decided to go a different route. I wasn't sure what the route was at first, but I figured if I kept moving, something would eventually click. I knew one thing. I wanted to be my own boss. I didn't have any money to back me up. In fact, I had less than $500 in my bank account after paying off student loans and the costs of moving into a tiny apartment. But I did have a computer and a relentless drive to make something of myself. I spent a lot of late nights researching various ways to make money online. I read blogs, watched YouTube videos, and followed every success story I could find. I came across affiliate marketing and thought, hey, this could work for me. At first, things were pretty rough. I didn't even know how to set up a website. But I learned, piece by piece. I built my first website on a free WordPress theme, and I started writing blog posts about a niche I was passionate about, fitness and wellness. I figured if I could help people live healthier lives while earning a bit of money through affiliate links to products, I'd be set. The first few months were brutal. My website got almost no traffic, and I made a grand total of $0 from affiliate commissions. But I kept going. I wasn't going to quit that easily. I knew that success in anything takes time. I kept experimenting with different ways to get traffic to my site: search engine optimization, SEO, social media, and eventually, paid ads. Slowly, traffic to my website started to grow. By month 6, I'd earned my first $100. It was a milestone. It wasn't much, but it was a signal that my hard work was beginning to pay off. That was when I realized that I was onto something. I wasn't going to get rich quick, but I was building something that had the potential to grow. I doubled down. I invested in a professional website redesign, hired a freelance writer to help with content creation, and started doing more aggressive marketing. I optimized my site for SEO, started creating video content, and worked on building an email list. Every month, my revenue increased, and by the end of my first year in business, I was making about $2,000 a month. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to pay the bills and give me some breathing room to think bigger. The next turning point came when I realized that affiliate marketing alone wasn't going to be enough. The margins were slim, and relying on other companies for my income didn't sit well with me. I wanted more control. I wanted to create my own products. So, I set out to design my first digital product, an ebook about fitness training for beginners. I had no idea what I was doing. I had never written an ebook before, and I wasn't sure how to make it appealing. But I remembered the old saying, done is better than perfect. So, I wrote the book, designed the cover myself, and launched it on my website. The first few days were a bit nerve-wracking. I didn't know if anyone would buy it. But then, something amazing happened. People actually bought it. Not a ton, but enough to validate that I was on the right path. Over the next few months, I continued to refine my ebook, adding more value, creating bonus materials, and promoting it through my email list and social media channels. Sales slowly but steadily increased. Eventually, I was making a few $1,000s a month from digital products alone. With the extra income, I decided to scale up. I hired a small team of freelancers to help with content creation, customer support, and marketing. I also started investing in online courses to learn more about business management, marketing, and product creation. I realized that I needed to keep learning if I wanted to grow my business. Fast forward a couple of years, and things had changed dramatically. I wasn't just selling one ebook anymore. I had a full suite of digital products, courses, workout plans, nutrition guides, and even a private membership site where people could access exclusive content and live coaching. I was making well over $10,000 a month and was able to quit my day job entirely. But success didn't come without challenges. In fact, the bigger my business got, the more problems arose. Customer service became a huge issue as my audience grew. I had to deal with technical problems, chargebacks, and unhappy customers. Not to mention, I had to constantly stay ahead of the competition. The market was crowded, and I had to find new ways to differentiate myself and keep people engaged. There were times when I felt like giving up. I was burned out, stressed, and questioning whether it was all worth it. But every time I hit a rough patch, I reminded myself of why I started. I wanted freedom, independence, and the ability to create something meaningful that could help people. That kept me going, even when things were tough. Now, years later, I run a 6-figure business and have a loyal community of customers who trust me. I'm proud of what I've built, but I know the journey is far from over. Entrepreneurship is a constant grind, and the challenges keep coming. But it's the grind that makes the victories so sweet. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. It all started with a simple decision to try something different. I didn't have a clear plan or a massive amount of capital to invest, but I had a vision and a willingness to work hard. And that's been enough to take me further than I ever thought possible. So, to anyone out there thinking about starting their own business, I'd say this: don't wait for the perfect moment, because it doesn't exist. Start small, learn as you go, and don't be afraid to fail. The road won't be easy, but the rewards are worth it. Stay consistent, stay focused, and most importantly, keep going. I remember the exact moment when I knew I was going to be an entrepreneur. It wasn't a grand epiphany, no moment of lightning striking or some divine intervention. It was a slow burn, a realization that, maybe, just maybe, I could build something for myself. It started when I was in my early 20s. I had just graduated from college with a degree in business administration. My friends were off to secure corporate jobs, landing big salaries and benefits, while I found myself uncertain of my path. I worked at a few startups, bouncing around, trying to get a feel for what I really wanted. It didn't take long to realize that the corporate world wasn't for me. I didn't want to climb the ladder at someone else's company. I wanted to build my own ladder. But I had no idea what to build or where to even begin. At that time, my savings were almost non-existent, and I was living paycheck to paycheck. I couldn't afford to quit and risk everything on some far-off idea that I wasn't sure would even work. I felt stuck. But sometimes, life has a way of nudging you, even when you're too afraid to take the first step. For me, that nudge came in the form of a random encounter with a guy named Sam. Sam wasn't anyone extraordinary, at least not in the traditional sense. He was a couple of years older than me, and we had crossed paths at one of the startup companies I worked at. Sam was a programmer, and not just any programmer. He had a knack for building things from scratch. I didn't know much about tech, but I knew Sam was different. One day, we bumped into each other at a local coffee shop. We started talking about what we were up to, and he casually mentioned that he had been working on an app. "You should give it a try," Sam said, almost as an afterthought. "It's a productivity app. Helps people keep track of their tasks and stay focused." I didn't think much of it at first. It wasn't the most revolutionary idea, but Sam's passion was undeniable. He was so invested in it, so excited about the possibilities of the app, that it rubbed off on me. We exchanged numbers, and I began following his progress. Over the next few months, Sam launched a beta version of the app. It didn't blow up, but it gained a small user base. More importantly, it was working. By this point, I had been toying with the idea of starting a business for a while. I was just too hesitant to take the leap. But Sam's app had something I didn't: momentum. He had something tangible. And that was the spark that ignited my entrepreneurial fire. I started helping Sam out, mostly with marketing. I couldn't code, but I could write a good copy and knew a little about growing a brand. Slowly, we built a small community around the app. I remember the first time we reached 100 users. It felt like we had won the lottery. We celebrated with cheap pizza and beers, but deep down, I knew this could be the start of something bigger. The app was gaining traction, but the road was far from easy. For every small win, there was a setback waiting around the corner. One of the biggest challenges we faced was monetization. We initially thought we could just sell the app for a one-time fee, but that didn't work out. People weren't willing to pay upfront for an app they hadn't used yet. So, we switched to a freemium model. It worked, but not as well as we'd hoped. We needed more than just a functional product. We needed something that would resonate with people. I spent weeks talking to users, reading feedback, and experimenting with new features. Eventually, we came up with a unique feature that set our app apart: a focus timer that adapted to your work style. It wasn't revolutionary, but it was enough to catch the eye of people who were struggling with productivity. Still, we weren't making a ton of money. We were living paycheck to paycheck, reinvesting everything into the business. The stress started to take its toll. There were moments when I doubted myself, when I thought about quitting and going back to the corporate world. But every time I considered that, I thought of how far we had come. I thought of the small wins, the emails from users telling us how much the app helped them. Those little bits of encouragement kept me going, even on the toughest days. About a year into our venture, we hit a tipping point. A well-known tech blog did a write-up about our app, and suddenly, everything changed. We went from 500 users to 5,000 in a matter of days. Our revenue grew, and we finally had the cushion we needed to invest in more features and expand the team. Sam and I finally hired a full-time developer to help take the load off, and things started moving faster. But even with the newfound success, I realized that we had only scratched the surface. There were still so many competitors, bigger companies with more resources. We had to innovate constantly, keep our users engaged, and find ways to differentiate ourselves. It wasn't just about building a product anymore. It was about building a brand, a community, and a reputation. Over the next few years, our app grew steadily. We introduced more features, improved the user interface, and started targeting larger companies with enterprise solutions. I had learned a lot about business, but one thing I hadn't expected was the sheer emotional toll it would take. There were highs and lows, moments where everything seemed to be going perfectly, followed by crashes where nothing seemed to work. But through it all, I never once considered going back to a regular job. I was addicted to the grind, the challenge, the freedom of building something that was mine. Now, looking back, it feels surreal. From those early days of uncertainty, when I barely had a dollar to my name, to now running a company with over 50 employees and thousands of users worldwide, it's been a wild ride. My journey wasn't smooth, and it wasn't quick. But I learned that entrepreneurship is more about persistence and adaptation than having the perfect plan from day one. To anyone who's thinking about taking the leap, it's not easy. It's not glamorous. It's a lot of hard work and sacrifice. But if you can weather the storm, if you can find that thing that keeps you going even when everything seems bleak, then it's worth it. You don't need to have everything figured out from the start. You just need to take that first step, no matter how small. And if you're lucky enough to meet someone like Sam, someone who shows you that passion is more important than perfection, hold on to that person. They might just be the person who helps you build the next big thing. I always knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Growing up in a small town, I didn't have the usual resources or role models, but I had an unwavering drive to succeed. It wasn't until later that I realized my journey would be filled with obstacles that tested my resilience, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. I was raised by a single mom who worked 2 jobs to make ends meet. We didn't have much, but she always managed to make sure I had the things I needed, even if it meant going without herself. I was the kind of kid who spent my free time reading about successful people. People like Steve Jobs and Richard Branson fascinated me, and I dreamed of building something that would one day be bigger than just me. But let me tell you, the path wasn't always clear. High school wasn't exactly my shining moment. I wasn't the most popular, nor was I the smartest in class. I was the quiet kid who always had my head in a book or scribbling ideas in a notebook. I didn't fit in with the crowd, but I also didn't care. I knew my future wasn't going to be found in the hallways of my high school. I'd made peace with that early on. After graduation, I had 2 options: go to college or start working. My mom, understandably, wanted me to go to college. She believed it was the safest route, but I felt like I had already learned enough from books. I was ready to take the plunge and do something that mattered. I moved to the city with about $1,000 in my pocket. I found a cheap apartment in a rundown building on the edge of downtown. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a roof over my head. I took on a couple of part-time jobs to pay the rent, but I spent every other waking moment working on my idea. I wanted to create something that would change the way people experience the world. At first, I tried a bunch of different ideas. I thought about starting a tech company, launching an e-commerce business, and even experimenting with a subscription box service. None of them took off. Some failed miserably, others fizzled out because I didn't have the right network or capital to make them work. I'd be lying if I said those early days didn't break me at times. There were weeks when I'd go to bed with empty pockets and wake up to the harsh reality that my dreams might never come true. But I kept going. One night, I was sitting in my apartment, feeling defeated, when I had an epiphany. What if I could combine my love for tech with something practical? Something that would solve a problem people actually cared about? That's when the idea for a mobile app came to me. It wasn't the most original idea, but I believed it could work. I spent the next few months learning everything I could about app development. I didn't have any formal training, so I taught myself through YouTube tutorials, online courses, and by talking to anyone who would listen. I scraped together enough money to hire a freelance developer who helped me build the first version of the app. It wasn't perfect, but I believed in it. I launched the app with no marketing budget and no idea how to get users. I posted about it on social media, reached out to some influencers, and hoped for the best. At first, it was a slow burn. For every 100 people who downloaded the app, only a few stuck around. But that small group of users gave me hope. They provided feedback, told me what they liked and didn't like, and over time, I was able to refine the app. Months passed, and I kept improving the app. But there was still one major obstacle I hadn't tackled: money. I was running out of savings, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep going. I had a choice to make: either go back to a regular job or find a way to get some funding. I decided to pitch my app to investors. I wrote a pitch deck, prepared a short presentation, and started emailing anyone who might be interested. The first few months were a blur of rejection after rejection. I heard no more times than I care to admit. But then, one day, I got a call. It was from an angel investor who had seen my app, liked the concept, and wanted to meet. That meeting changed everything. The investor saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself. He believed in my vision, and within a few weeks, I had a small investment that would allow me to quit my part-time jobs and focus entirely on the app. It wasn't a huge amount, but it was enough to keep me afloat and take things to the next level. I used the money to hire a small team of developers and marketers. We worked day and night, improving the app, adding new features, and creating a marketing plan. Slowly but surely, users started flocking to the app. We had a breakthrough when a tech blogger wrote about it, and that brought in a surge of new downloads. But success didn't come easy. Even with funding and a growing user base, we still faced challenges. I had to navigate the complexity of scaling a business, dealing with customer service issues, and figuring out how to monetize the app effectively. The pressure was relentless. I worked long hours, often 14 to 16 hours a day, just to stay ahead of the curve. I made mistakes, some costly ones, but each failure taught me something valuable. Over time, the app started generating revenue. We began turning a profit, and that was when I knew we were onto something. I reinvested every penny into the business, expanding the team, improving the product, and pushing out regular updates. Fast forward a couple of years, and the app became one of the top 10 apps in its category. It wasn't just a financial success, it was a personal victory. All the sleepless nights, the doubts, the failures, it had all led to this moment. The app wasn't just solving a problem anymore, it was changing people's lives. Looking back now, I can't help but feel proud of what we accomplished. There were times when I thought about giving up, when I questioned whether it was all worth it. But every step of the journey, even the painful ones, taught me something about resilience, about staying focused, and about believing in myself when no one else did. Today, I'm still running the company, and we're working on new projects to expand our reach. The journey is far from over, but I can honestly say that the lessons I learned along the way are invaluable. Entrepreneurship isn't easy, but it's worth it if you're willing to put in the work. If you take anything from my story, let it be this: never give up on your dreams, no matter how many times you fail. The road may be long and tough, but every setback is an opportunity to learn and grow. If you stay committed, success will come in time. And when it does, it'll be so much sweeter because you earned it. I never intended to become an entrepreneur. In fact, I actively avoided it. My dad ran a small landscaping business when I was a kid, and I watched him come home sunburned, bone-tired, and sometimes so stressed about payroll that he wouldn't sleep. I figured I'd go the other way. Office job, health insurance, weekends off. Easy life. By 26, I had that job. Entry-level data analyst at a mid-sized consulting firm in Chicago. Not glamorous, but it paid the bills and came with free coffee. I shared a 2-bedroom apartment with a friend from college, and my biggest splurge each month was a bottle of decent whiskey. It was fine. Then COVID hit. The company held on for about 7 months before the first wave of layoffs. I was in the second. They gave me 2 week severance and a half-hearted promise to keep me in mind. For the first month, I didn't panic. I had savings, I could freelance, I could take a course or two. But freelance data gigs weren't exactly flooding in, and I was starting to burn through my emergency fund. That's when my neighbor, Sam, asked if I could help him with something. He ran a small e-commerce shop that sold niche camping gear, stuff like titanium sporks and solar-powered lighters, and he was overwhelmed. I didn't know anything about Shopify or inventory logistics, but I figured, why not? I started helping him out for a small hourly rate, mostly organizing spreadsheets, tracking shipments, and cleaning up the product listings. But as I poked around, I noticed patterns in the sales data. Certain products would spike at weird times, or certain bundles would almost always sell together. I built a few dashboards for him, automated some of the stuff he was doing manually, and suggested some product page tweaks. His revenue jumped 25% in 2 months. That's when the idea hit me, not to go all in on e-commerce, but to offer data optimization to other small online stores. I knew there were a million guys like Sam out there, scraping by, with no clue how to read the numbers. And I figured I could build a little consulting side hustle until I found a real job again. I posted on a few forums, reached out to some Shopify Facebook groups, and offered a free audit to the first 10 stores that responded. Out of 10, 4 never followed up. 2 told me they didn't want to change anything. But the other 4? They were into it. I sent them detailed reports, fixed some glaring issues, and made modest but noticeable impacts. One of them offered to pay me to keep going. By month 4, I had 6 paying clients and was making almost as much as I had at my old job. That's when my brain short-circuited. I started thinking, what if this is the real job? The biggest turning point came when a client referred me to a store doing nearly $500,000 a year in revenue, but hemorrhaging profits. Their backend was a mess. Their ad spend was completely untargeted. I dove in like a man possessed. I cut their return rate by optimizing product descriptions and adding size guides. I restructured their ad campaigns based on customer LTV. We moved their top SKUs to a 3PL that saved them 12% on shipping. 3 months later, their profit margin had doubled. They signed a retainer contract with me for $3,500 a month. That was the moment. The first time I saw real money and realized I wasn't just scraping by. I was actually building something. So I stopped calling myself a freelancer and started saying I ran a boutique data consultancy for e-commerce businesses. I hired my first contractor, a friend from college who specialized in automation, then a copywriter, then a part-time VA in the Philippines. My living room turned into an accidental office, and I began working 14-hour days, but I didn't mind. For the first time, I had full control. I named the company Insight Nest. Lame, I know, but the domain was available, and it sounded vaguely professional. I invested in branding, built a decent-looking website, and even started cold emailing larger companies with personalized audits. About 1 in 40 responded, but that one made it worth it. By the end of year 1, we hit $280,000 in revenue. It wasn't glamorous. There was no viral launch, no investor backing, no dramatic pivot. Just a slow grind of solving real problems and getting a little better each time. Most of our clients were under the radar, small to mid-sized stores doing $100,000 to $5 million a year, drowning in disorganized data. We made sense of the chaos and gave them clarity. Year 2 was harder. We grew too fast, and I made some dumb hires. I brought on a guy who claimed to be a data scientist, but couldn't code a basic query. Lost 2 clients because of his mistakes. I learned to vet people better. I also tried launching a digital course on e-commerce data mastery. It flopped. I spent $7,000 on ads and sold 13 copies. But we adapted. I stopped trying to scale like a Silicon Valley startup and leaned into what we did well. High-touch consulting with measurable ROI. We niched down even further, focusing exclusively on DTC brands with at least $500,000 in annual revenue. At the end of year 2, we crossed $600,000 in revenue. Now I'm in year 3. I have a team of 9. We have systems, onboarding docs, recurring revenue from monthly retainers, and a wait list. I still work too much. I still wake up at 3 a.m. sometimes wondering when it'll all fall apart. But I also remember the version of me sitting on the couch during lockdown, wondering how the hell I was going to pay rent. This life wasn't the plan, but it's better than anything I could have planned. It's hard, and it's messy, and it's all mine. If I had to boil down what worked, it's this. I listened, I solved real problems, and I didn't pretend to be bigger than I was. I stayed scrappy. I asked for help. I got better. You don't have to be a genius or have a revolutionary idea. You just have to find a group of people with a problem and care enough to fix it well. And maybe, just maybe, be willing to walk through a door when it cracks open. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I never thought selling socks would make me a millionaire, but here we are. This all started as a joke between me and my brother during a brutally cold winter in Chicago. I was working a 9 to 5 as a marketing associate for a mid-sized logistics firm. It was one of those jobs where you go in, sit at a desk, and watch your soul slowly chip away like peeling paint. My brother Dave had just graduated and was in that post-college limbo of applying to jobs and binge-watching every show ever made. One night in January, after a few beers and a failed attempt at building a bookshelf from IKEA, We got to talking about how all socks suck. Not that they don't do their job, keeping feet warm and all, but they're just so boring. Either they're too expensive, or they fall apart after a few washes. Or they come in those annoying packs with 6 slightly different shades of gray, and you're forever playing sock roulette. Dave joked, what if we made socks people actually want to wear? Not just look at and go meh. Like socks that tell a story? I laughed. What kind of story would a sock tell? Like, once upon a time, a foot was cold. But something about it stuck. I couldn't stop thinking about it for the rest of the week. I started doodling sock ideas in my notebook during work meetings. I thought, what if socks could be bold, weird, and maybe even collectible? Like trading cards for your feet. Silly? Sure. But everything fun starts out a little silly. We called the idea Socktopus. It started as a pun, octopus with 8 socks, get it, and kind of took on a life of its own. Our idea was simple. Every month we'd drop a limited edition set of socks with a theme. Not just patterns, but actual tiny stories that came with them. One month was intergalactic sushi with space shrimp and soy sauce rockets. Another was Murder on the Foot Express, little detective-themed socks with monocles and trench coats. It was niche, absurd, and exactly the kind of thing we'd buy ourselves. We pooled about $3,000 together, mostly from my savings and Dave's part-time barista gig. We bought a Shopify theme, paid a local graphic designer to help clean up our sketches, and found a supplier in North Carolina willing to do small batch custom socks. Our first drop was in May, 300 pairs, all themed cryptid commute. Mothman, Bigfoot, Jersey Devil all riding a subway. We priced them at $12 a pair or $30 for the set of 3. We sold out in a week. Our marketing strategy? Pure chaos. Dave ran the Socktopus Instagram like it was a character in its own right, a confused cephalopod trying to understand human fashion. We leaned hard into the lore. Our captions were all written in weird, semi-mythical tones. The gods have spoken. Toe coverage shall be stylish and strange. It was dumb. People loved it. By August, we were making enough for me to quit my job. Dave and I turned the living room into Sock HQ. We stored inventory in giant Rubbermaid tubs, used my car for local deliveries, and started taking pre-orders to fund the next month's designs. We ran polls, invited our followers to submit sock ideas, and even had a little segment called Sock of the Month, where fans voted on their favorite pair. People got weirdly invested. Our big break came from a viral tweet. Some influencer with 1 million followers posted a photo of our Loch Ness business meeting socks with the caption, "My socks are more productive than me." Overnight, our site traffic exploded. We made $25,000 in one weekend. Our supplier couldn't keep up. It was chaos, but the good kind, the kind where you realize this might actually be a thing. Fast forward 6 months. We had a warehouse in a nearby industrial park and 3 full-time employees. I was learning how to navigate supply chain nightmares, customer service snafus, and the strange subculture of sock fanatics. We launched a subscription box called Socktopus Secret Society and grew to 5,000 monthly subscribers. We even started working with small artists and illustrators to feature their designs, splitting profits 50-50. People loved the idea of supporting independent creatives. Of course, it wasn't all fun and weird feet fashion. In our second year, we nearly lost everything to a misprint disaster. We ordered 10,000 socks for a massive ocean apocalypse theme, only to realize that the supplier had gotten the color palette wrong on half of them. Instead of moody navy blues and deep-sea greens, we had a bunch of bright orange and lime green abominations. At first, I thought it was over. $40,000 down the drain. Dave had the genius idea of spinning it into a toxic tide substory. We rewrote the narrative to make it part of the storyline, mutant sea creatures corrupted by industrial waste. Not only did we sell them all, but people loved them more than the original designs. That moment taught me one of the most valuable lessons in entrepreneurship. Your mistakes can become your brand, if you own them right. Last year, we hit $2.1 million in revenue. We've done collabs with indie video game developers, run a line of socks inspired by urban legends submitted by our fans, and even launched a Socktopus for Kids line. We still operate out of Chicago, but now we've got a proper office, a creative team, and a full-time warehouse staff. And despite it all, we've kept it weird. We still drop monthly themes. We still write little stories for each pair. Our tagline? Strange comfort for strange people. It's not just socks. It's a community of misfits who found a little joy in the unexpected. I look back at that night, drunk, cold, half buried in particle board, and I think, If we hadn't made that dumb octopus pun, I'd still be staring at spreadsheets in a cubicle. So yeah, I sell socks for a living. And it's the best thing that's ever happened to me. I never set out to be an entrepreneur. In fact, I had a perfectly average plan for my life. Graduate college, get a decent job in marketing, work my way up, maybe freelance a little on the side if I got bored. But that plan derailed when I got laid off during a company restructuring in 2019. I had just turned 27. No savings, a ton of student loans, and a lease I couldn't break for another 6 months. It was the first time I'd ever really panicked about money. I spent the first few weeks applying to everything, from content writing gigs to customer support jobs. No bites. It was like I dropped off the face of the earth. During that limbo, I started doing freelance copywriting for small e-commerce brands I found through Facebook groups and Reddit. It wasn't much, a couple $100 here and there, but it kept the lights on. More importantly, I started noticing something weird. These e-com owners were spending hundreds, sometimes thousands, on ads and influencers but had absolutely garbage product descriptions, broken email funnels, or no content strategy whatsoever. I didn't think much of it until one of my clients, a guy selling weighted blankets, told me that my copy had increased his conversion rate by 30%. I asked to see the numbers, and sure enough, his sales had jumped in a way that was impossible to ignore. He casually mentioned hiring me again for a product launch. That was the first moment I thought, wait, is this a business? I didn't have a fancy plan. No LLC. No website. Just a Google Doc with a list of services and a Stripe link. But over the next few months, I started collecting more of these small e-commerce clients, mostly by word of mouth. I branded myself as the conversion copy guy and leaned hard into it. I created a Notion database of all my client results, turned them into mini case studies, and started cold emailing similar brands. By mid-2020, I was making about $8,000 per month. Not amazing, but way more than I'd made at my job, and I was doing it from my couch. Still, I was burning out writing every single piece myself, and I knew I was hitting a ceiling. That's when I had the idea to turn it into an agency. I'd never hired anyone before. I was terrified of messing it up, but I figured I could start small. I brought on a part-time junior writer and a virtual assistant from the Philippines. That was the beginning of my agency, which I eventually named ClearThread. The next 2 years were a blur. We specialized in copy and CRO conversion rate optimization for DTC brands. I built out systems, SOPs, onboarding templates, all the stuff I never cared about but absolutely had to do if I wanted to scale. By late 2021, we were a team of 8, and I was grossing $40,000 to $60,000 per month. I'd even started offering a productized audit service for smaller brands, which became a gateway to our bigger retainers. Sounds smooth, right? It wasn't. In Q1 of 2022, I made the mistake of signing 3 high-ticket clients without really vetting them. One was an NFT brand that collapsed 2 months later. Another ghosted me after we delivered 2 weeks of work. The third dragged out invoices and killed our cash flow. I had payroll due, credit card debt climbing, and one of my top writers quit after feeling burned out. I remember sitting in a Starbucks parking lot, sweating bullets and emailing my dad for a $5,000 loan just to float the month. That was my rock bottom. I realized I'd built a business that looked great on paper but had no foundation. I was chasing shiny contracts instead of building systems that could scale and survive setbacks. So I spent the next 3 months doing the hard stuff, firing bad clients, raising prices, trimming services down to what we were best at, and automating literally everything I could. I implemented a minimum engagement fee, added kill fees to contracts, and built a 2-week onboarding sprint for new clients that streamlined the entire kickoff process. I rehired smarter too, focusing on people who could think strategically, not just follow checklists. Fast forward to today, April 2025, ClearThread is leaner and more profitable than ever. We're a team of 6 now, including me. We focus on high retention, long-term clients, and do about $70,000 per month in revenue, with a 40% profit margin. I finally started paying myself a real salary, $100,000 per year, put $30,000 into a SEP IRA, and just took my first 2-week vacation in years. No laptop, no calls, no fires. I still have imposter syndrome sometimes. I've never raised a dime, never gone viral, never landed a Fortune 500 client. But I've built a real business from nothing, during a pandemic, with no outside help. I still remember what it felt like to check my bank account and see $14.87 in it. I think that fear never totally goes away, it just morphs into drive. If you're reading this and feel stuck, broke, or like you missed your shot, you haven't. I wasn't some genius with a master plan. I just found one small pain point, solved it well, and doubled down. Then I messed up, fixed it, and did it again. That's literally all business is. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait to feel ready. Just start. I've always been a firm believer in the idea that you don't have to be born into success to achieve it. You don't need fancy connections or a trust fund to make something of yourself. But I'll admit, the road to building my business was full of setbacks, failures, and many times when I questioned whether I should just give up and take a safe job. It all started about 7 years ago. I was in my early 20s, freshly graduated from college with a degree in marketing. The world was my oyster, or so I thought. I had just enough student loans to make me feel like an adult, and just enough optimism to think I could conquer the world. I was ready to dive into the job market, but the economy was recovering from the 2008 financial crash, and the job market was pretty grim. I applied to what felt like 1,000 places, but all I had to show for it was a mountain of rejection emails. At first, I tried to get into marketing at some big companies, but the competition was fierce. I wasn't exactly what they were looking for, and I wasn't prepared to play the networking game that everyone seemed to swear by. I tried small agencies too, but I just couldn't get a foot in the door. So, I did what I thought was the next best thing. I took a job as a sales rep for a tech company. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a paycheck, and I needed one. The first few months were rough. Sales reps at this company were expected to make hundreds of cold calls every day. I hated it. It was demoralizing, and no matter how many times I was told, it's just a numbers game, I felt like I was failing. But it was there that I learned a few key lessons. First, I learned how to sell. Second, I learned how to keep pushing even when it felt like no one was listening. And third, I learned that success was all about persistence. I still wasn't in love with the job, but I was good at it. I could close deals, and that skill became invaluable later on. While I was grinding away at this job, I started dabbling in side projects. I had an idea for an app that I thought could make a difference in the way small businesses approached social media marketing. It was a simple concept, an all-in-one platform where businesses could schedule, post, and analyze their social media in one place. At the time, there were tools for scheduling posts, tools for analytics, and tools for content creation, but nothing that brought them all together in one easy-to-use package. I thought, this is it. This is the product I'm going to build. The only problem? I had no technical skills. I couldn't code, I didn't know how to design an app, and I certainly didn't have the budget to hire someone to do it for me. So, I did the next best thing. I started learning. I taught myself basic coding through online tutorials, and over the next few months, I built a very rudimentary prototype of the app one envisioned. It was clunky, didn't do half of what I wanted it to do, and looked like it was made in the early 2000s. But it was a start. I showed it to some friends who were small business owners. They didn't exactly love it, but they saw potential. They gave me feedback, which helped me refine the product. Every weekend, I worked on it, and every day after work, I would put in a few hours of coding and design. It was exhausting, but it was also thrilling. I felt like I was finally working towards something that could truly make a difference. After about 6 months of working on it, I decided to take the plunge and officially launch the app. It was nothing special, just a simple version of what I had in mind. I didn't have a big marketing budget, and I didn't know how to promote it effectively. So, I did what I knew best. I started cold emailing small business owners, offering them a free trial. At first, I didn't get much traction, but eventually, a few businesses signed up. They used the app, and some of them even gave me glowing feedback. But the real breakthrough came when I started doing something I was uncomfortable with, asking for referrals. I reached out to my initial users and asked them to refer the app to others in their network. This was a huge step for me, as I had always been the kind of person who didn't like to ask for help. But it paid off. Slowly but surely, word began to spread. Then came the moment that changed everything. One of my early users reached out to me and told me they had been using my app for months and were seeing tangible improvements in their social media engagement. They said they were going to give a demo of it to a small group of other business owners they knew, and that could be a huge opportunity. I was terrified. What if it was a disaster? What if the app crashed during the demo? But I had no choice but to trust that the work I had put in would be enough. The demo went off without a hitch, and within weeks, I had dozens of new users. From there, things took off. I started reaching out to more small businesses, building partnerships, and growing my customer base. The app wasn't perfect, but it was getting better every day. I eventually brought on a few part-time contractors to help with coding and design. My sales skills from my old job came in handy when negotiating partnerships and figuring out how to price the product. Every little piece of the puzzle started to fall into place. A few years into this journey, I realized that what I had created wasn't just a side project anymore. It was a full-fledged business. By the time I was 30, I had scaled the business into something I could be proud of. We had a small but dedicated team, a growing user base, and a product that was genuinely helping small businesses grow their online presence. I was no longer working a 9-to-5 job. I was living my dream. There were plenty of sleepless nights, moments of doubt, and tough decisions along the way. But looking back, I wouldn't trade any of it for the world. Entrepreneurship isn't easy. It's not glamorous, and it's not a straight line to success. But the lessons you learn, the people you meet, and the feeling of seeing your hard work pay off make it all worth it. If there's one piece of advice I would give to anyone looking to start their own business, it's this: don't wait for the perfect moment. There is no perfect moment. You just have to start. Build it, test it, learn from your mistakes, and keep pushing forward. There will be times when it feels like you're fighting an uphill battle, but every step you take brings you closer to your goal. So, just keep going. Fast forward to today, and my app has turned into a successful SaaS business with thousands of active users. We're profitable, and we've expanded our offerings to include additional features that I never could have dreamed of when I first started. I'm incredibly proud of what we've built, and I know the best is yet to come. Looking back at that kid in his early 20s, unsure of where he was headed, I can't help but feel grateful for every struggle, failure, and lesson that brought me here. I didn't have a blueprint, and I certainly didn't have all the answers. But I kept moving forward, and that's what made all the difference. I remember the exact moment my entrepreneurial journey began. It wasn't some dramatic eureka moment or a flash of inspiration. No, it was far simpler and much more humbling than that. It started with a small idea, a little curiosity, and a desperate need to pay the bills. At the time, I had just graduated from college, no job prospects, and a mountain of student loans hanging over my head. I was living in a tiny apartment in a city I could barely afford, and I didn't even have the luxury of a safety net to fall back on. The pressure was real. It all began with a phone call from my mom. "Honey, have you thought about what you're going to do next?" she asked. She wasn't asking for specifics. She wasn't asking me to solve the world's problems. She was just concerned. My mom, being the kind-hearted woman she was, had been giving me a lot of pep talks, but at that point, they had become more like desperate pleas. "I don't know, Mom," I said, sighing. "I'm just trying to figure it out." She told me, in that moment, something that I didn't quite understand at the time but would become crucial to my future. "Maybe you should try doing something you've always been good at. People make money by solving problems. What problem can you solve?" I didn't have an immediate answer, but I thought about it for a while. As I sat in that tiny, underfurnished apartment, I realized that I had always been good with technology. Specifically, I had a knack for fixing computers. In high school, I used to fix my friends' broken laptops, install software, and troubleshoot problems for them. They paid me in snacks and occasionally small amounts of money, but it never crossed my mind that this could actually be a legitimate business idea. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that there was a potential market out there. People need their computers to work, and there was a growing need for tech support. This was in the mid-2000s, when tech was booming and computer repair services weren't as easily accessible as they are now. But I had no idea where to start. I had no capital, no business experience, and certainly no clients. Just the knowledge that I was good with tech and the determination to make something happen. I decided to take a leap of faith. I didn't have money for a business license or fancy marketing materials, so I did what I could. I created a simple website using free tools, put up a few flyers around town, and started offering my services to friends, family, and anyone who would listen. My first job came a week later. A friend of my cousin needed a laptop screen replaced. It was a small job, but it was my first paying gig, and I was ecstatic. I did the job for a fraction of what larger tech shops would charge, but I didn't care. It wasn't about the money. It was about proving that I could actually do this. Word of mouth spread quickly. As people saw that I was reliable, affordable, and good at what I did, my client base grew. I started getting more and more calls, sometimes for simple repairs, other times for complicated issues. The most surprising part of it all was that people weren't just looking for someone to fix their computers. They were looking for someone they could trust. I became known as the guy who fixes computers in my local area. The trust factor became one of the most important aspects of my business. Soon, I was working from my apartment. The small repair jobs I did initially were now taking up all my time. I didn't mind. It was the start of something, and I was proud of that. But it was becoming clear that my apartment wasn't an ideal workspace for a growing business. So, I took the next step. I rented a small office space in a strip mall. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a step forward. It allowed me to work on multiple computers at once, store parts, and even have clients come in without having to meet them in my cramped living room. But this wasn't enough. In an age where everyone seemed to be doing something online, I realized I needed to expand my reach beyond just local clients. The internet was growing, and it was becoming a vital tool for businesses. So, I took a chance and launched an online computer repair service. I developed a remote repair service where customers could pay me to fix their computers over the internet. It was a risky move, as I wasn't sure how people would respond to the idea of letting a stranger access their computer remotely. But I had faith in my skills and in my ability to solve problems. I started advertising my new service through online ads and social media. At first, it was slow, but as more people began to trust my reputation, the online business began to take off. I was receiving requests from all over the country, and even a few from overseas. I knew that I had tapped into something huge, something that could eventually turn into a full-fledged business. But there was one problem. I was still a one-man show. I had to make a decision. Either I continued working alone, growing at a slower pace, or I expanded, which would require hiring a team. It was a terrifying thought. Hiring employees meant I would be responsible for more than just my own success. I would have to manage people, handle payroll, and ensure that I maintained the quality of service that had made my business what it was. But after much consideration, I decided to take the plunge. I hired my first employee, a technician, to help with repairs. The moment he walked into the office, I knew I had made the right decision. Having someone by my side took a huge load off my shoulders. We were able to handle more clients, fix more problems, and grow faster than ever before. The business expanded even further when I started offering monthly service contracts for businesses, ensuring ongoing revenue. By now, my business was no longer just a side hustle. It was a thriving tech company with a small team of employees, a solid client base, and a growing reputation. I never imagined that something as simple as fixing computers in my spare time would turn into a full-blown business, but here I was. And it wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about building something that could last. Looking back, it's crazy to think about how far I've come. I went from being a broke college graduate with no direction to owning a successful business. But what I learned through it all is that success doesn't come from some grand, momentous idea. It comes from solving problems, building trust, and taking risks. You don't need a business degree or a ton of money to start. You just need a little creativity, a lot of determination, and a willingness to fail. Now, as I sit in my office, surrounded by a growing team of dedicated employees, I'm constantly reminded of how lucky I am. Not everyone gets to turn a simple idea into something meaningful. But I know that I wouldn't be here if it weren't for the small, humble beginnings, the moments when I took a chance and trusted myself. And as long as I keep solving problems, I know that this journey will continue to take me to places I never expected. It's crazy to think that it all started with a phone call from my mom, asking me what problem I could solve. Sometimes, the best business ideas come from the simplest questions. I never expected to become an entrepreneur. Growing up, I thought I would end up like everyone else, going to college, getting a normal job, and living a predictable life. But life had other plans for me, and looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. This is the story of how I stumbled into entrepreneurship, and how a series of mistakes, unexpected turns, and countless sleepless nights led me to where I am today. It all started when I was working my first job out of college. I had graduated with a degree in marketing and found a relatively decent job in a small company in my hometown. I was a marketing assistant, handling everything from social media to email campaigns to basic content creation. My boss was a kind guy, but he ran the company like a well-oiled machine. There was no room for mistakes, and there was even less room for creative freedom. I was a cog in the wheel, and I hated it. The pay was decent, but I always felt like I could be doing something more. I wanted to make an impact, to create something from scratch, to feel like I was building something real. The idea of becoming an entrepreneur seemed so far off, something only the lucky or super talented could achieve. But it wouldn't leave me. I would daydream about running my own company, being my own boss, and building something meaningful. The first spark of change came unexpectedly. One afternoon, as I was scrolling through LinkedIn, a habit that most of us get into when we're bored at work, I stumbled upon an ad for an online course on e-commerce. The course promised to teach you how to build a successful online store from scratch. I was intrigued but skeptical. I had never considered e-commerce before. At the time, it sounded too complicated, and frankly, I didn't even know where to start. But after a few weeks of obsessing over it, I decided to take the plunge. I saved up a bit of money and signed up for the course. The first few lessons were overwhelming. The jargon was new, the processes were unfamiliar, and I felt completely out of my depth. But the more I learned, the more excited I became. This wasn't just theory, it was practical knowledge. It was tangible. I was learning how to build something from nothing. I spent nights and weekends diving into the course material. I started researching products, studying market trends, and figuring out the logistics of running an online store. It was exhausting, but I was hooked. Eventually, I made my first big decision. I would start an online store selling custom-designed phone cases. At the time, the market was flooded with options, but I had an idea to differentiate myself. My designs would be personalized, and I would cater to a niche audience of young professionals who wanted something more unique than the generic options available. I set up a Shopify store, sourced the materials, and launched my website. I thought I was ready, but within a week, I realized that I had made a ton of mistakes. My website looked amateurish, my product descriptions were weak, and my marketing efforts barely made a dent in the market. The sales? They were non-existent. I was devastated, but I wasn't ready to give up. Instead of retreating, I doubled down on learning. I started reading blogs, watching YouTube tutorials, and joining online communities of other entrepreneurs who were facing the same challenges. I quickly realized that I had underestimated the importance of branding and the value of social proof. I redesigned my website, created high-quality product photos, and built a social media presence on Instagram. Slowly but surely, things started to pick up. At first, sales were slow, but they were consistent. I had customers, even if it was only a handful every week. It felt like a huge win to me. Every positive review, every happy customer, made me feel like I was on the right path. But the work didn't stop there. I had to figure out how to scale. I reinvested my profits into ads, hired a freelance designer to help me create fresh designs, and started collaborating with influencers to spread the word. The real breakthrough came when I created a viral campaign on Instagram. I ran a giveaway contest where followers could win a set of custom phone cases if they shared the post and tagged their friends. The response was overwhelming. My followers grew exponentially, and my website traffic skyrocketed. That giveaway alone brought in hundreds of new customers, and more importantly, it gave me the momentum I needed to take my business to the next level. But as any entrepreneur will tell you, success is never as simple as it seems. With growth came new challenges. My supplier couldn't keep up with the increased demand, and I had to scramble to find alternatives. Shipping times were longer than I anticipated, leading to unhappy customers. My ads weren't as effective as they used to be, and I had to constantly tweak my strategies to maintain a profitable return on investment. There were nights when I'd lie awake, wondering if I had made the right choice. I missed the stability of my old job, the predictable paycheck, and the absence of constant stress. But every time I thought about quitting, I would remember why I started in the first place. I wanted to build something that was mine. I wanted to prove to myself that I could make it as an entrepreneur. Over the next couple of years, I continued to push through the growing pains. I brought on a small team to help with customer service, inventory management, and marketing. I refined my systems, improved my product line, and expanded my brand into new niches. I learned about SEO, email marketing, and the importance of creating a memorable customer experience. Eventually, my phone case business turned into a full-fledged brand with multiple product lines. I started offering custom merchandise for events, businesses, and influencers. I expanded to selling not just phone cases, but custom bags, apparel, and accessories. My revenue grew steadily, and I began to feel like I was finally getting the hang of entrepreneurship. The most rewarding part, however, wasn't the money or the recognition. It was the freedom I had gained. I could make my own decisions, set my own schedule, and choose the projects I wanted to work on. I no longer felt like a cog in a machine. I had created something that was mine, and that was worth more than I could have ever imagined. Looking back, I realized that the road to entrepreneurship wasn't smooth. There were plenty of mistakes, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But through it all, I learned that failure is not the end. It's just a part of the process. What matters is your willingness to learn, adapt, and keep going. There were days when it felt like I was too far and over my head, but I stuck with it because I believed in what I was building. And now, I'm living proof that with persistence, creativity, and a little bit of luck, anyone can build something from nothing. I'll start this story by saying that I never expected to be where I am today. I always assumed I'd work a regular 9 to 5 job, maybe climb the corporate ladder and live a pretty average life. But here I am, a few years later, running a successful tech company. It wasn't easy, and I never thought it would be. But looking back now, I can't believe how much I've learned, how many times I almost gave up, and how this journey turned out. Let me rewind to the beginning. I was always a decent student growing up. Not exceptional, but good enough to pass, with a particular interest in tech and how things work behind the scenes. In high school, I built my first website. It was basic, just a few pages with some HTML and CSS. Nothing fancy. But that little project sparked something inside me. I started reading everything I could about coding, software, and how businesses use tech to scale. By the time I graduated, I knew that tech was where I wanted to be. The problem was, I had no clear direction for how to make it a career. I enrolled in a local university to study computer science, but I quickly realized that traditional education wasn't going to cut it for me. I didn't want to just be another employee at a tech company, following the instructions of a boss. I wanted to build something of my own, create something that could change the way people interacted with technology. But I was stuck in the same old routine, lectures, assignments, and projects that didn't exactly excite me. During my second year of college, I decided to drop out. I didn't tell anyone, not even my parents at first. I just felt like the classroom wasn't for me. I had the burning desire to get out there, try things, and maybe fail a few times. I used the money I had saved up from part-time jobs to start building my first real product, a mobile app. It was a simple idea, an app that helped small businesses manage their inventory better. I called it Stockmate. I had no business experience, no marketing strategy, and no idea how to make it big. All I knew was that I could build the app. So, I went all in. I spent months working on it, late nights coding, learning new frameworks, and testing my ideas. Eventually, I had a working prototype. But then came the hard part, how to actually make people use it. I spent some time reading blogs, watching YouTube videos, and listening to podcasts about entrepreneurship. A lot of it was overwhelming, but a few things stuck with me. I needed to focus on one thing at a time, and I needed to find customers who would actually benefit from my app. So, I reached out to a few local small business owners, and to my surprise, some of them agreed to try the app. They were skeptical, but they gave me feedback, and that feedback was invaluable. I spent the next few months iterating and refining the product. Slowly but surely, things started to come together. Stockmate wasn't a massive success, but I had my first real taste of what it felt like to build something from nothing. And that feeling stuck with me. But I wasn't ready to quit my day job just yet. I got a few freelance gigs, working as a web developer and building small apps for clients. These jobs weren't glamorous, but they helped me pay the bills while I kept working on my own projects. Eventually, I met a few other entrepreneurs who were also working on tech startups. We started sharing ideas, swapping advice, and brainstorming. I learned a lot from these conversations. One key lesson I learned was that building a product was only part of the equation. You also had to build a brand and create a community around what you were doing. Around this time, I had an idea for a new product. It wasn't related to inventory management like Stockmate, but it was still a software solution. This time, I wanted to build an AI-powered tool that could help content creators optimize their workflows. The idea was to automate a lot of the time-consuming tasks that content creators dealt with, like scheduling posts, optimizing SEO, and analyzing engagement. I called it ContentBot. No, I'm not going to lie. The journey from Stockmate to ContentBot was not smooth. There were moments when I thought I had finally cracked it, only to realize that the market wasn't ready for what I had built. There were long stretches where I felt like I was just throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping something would stick. I had days where I wanted to quit, but I kept going. I kept reading, learning, and improving. One of the biggest challenges I faced was marketing. ContentBot was a niche product, and at first, I wasn't sure how to reach the people who would benefit from it. I tried paid ads, but they didn't give me the ROI I was hoping for. So, I turned to social media and began building an online community. I engaged with content creators, offering advice, answering questions, and slowly gaining their trust. I even started a blog to share my journey and insights into building a tech startup. It was slow, but over time, the community grew. People started recommending ContentBot to each other, and the product started getting traction. By the time I reached my first serious funding round, I had a working product, a small but loyal user base, and a growing network of mentors and advisors. I pitched my idea to investors, and while it wasn't easy, I managed to secure enough funding to take ContentBot to the next level. That was a game changer. With the funding, I was able to hire a small team of developers, designers, and marketers, and we began scaling rapidly. There were still challenges, of course. Scaling a product is never smooth, and there were several moments where we almost ran out of money or hit a technical roadblock that seemed impossible to overcome. But every time we faced a setback, we pushed through. We innovated, pivoted when needed, and always stayed true to the core of what ContentBot was about. Today, ContentBot is a recognized tool in the content creation space. We've expanded our features, we have users across the globe, and we've even landed some high-profile partnerships. But more than that, I'm proud of the community we've built. It's incredible to look back and see how far we've come, from that lonely night coding stockmate to running a successful tech company with a team of amazing people. The moral of the story? It's simple. If you're passionate about something, don't be afraid to take the leap. I had no idea what I was doing when I started, and I failed more times than I care to admit. But every failure was a lesson, and every lesson brought me closer to success. I still have a long way to go, and I'm not saying it's been easy. But looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. There were days when I doubted myself, when I thought I wasn't cut out for this, but I stuck with it. And now, I get to do what I love every day. If you're reading this and thinking about starting your own thing, just remember, the hardest part is getting started. Once you do, the rest will follow. Stay persistent, keep learning, and never, ever give up. I remember the day I decided to quit my corporate job like it was yesterday. I was sitting in a dull, fluorescent-lit office, surrounded by gray cubicles, staring at the clock, counting down the minutes until I could go home. For most people, it might have just been another average day, but for me, it was the tipping point. I had been climbing the corporate ladder for nearly a decade, earning a decent salary, receiving annual bonuses, and getting the occasional pat on the back for a job well done. On the outside, everything looked fine, but on the inside, I felt like I was suffocating. I was a marketing manager at a mid-sized tech company, and while the job seemed stable, it never fully fulfilled me. I spent my days crafting email campaigns, analyzing data, attending endless meetings, and doing the same routine day after day. I wanted more freedom, more impact, more purpose. I had an idea that had been simmering in my mind for a while, but I was too scared to act on it. I wanted to start my own business. Growing up, I was always the idea person. I'd sketch out new product concepts on napkins during family dinners or dream of side hustles to pitch to my friends. But I never took the leap. It felt too risky. I had responsibilities, rent, bills, and a lifestyle that I had worked hard to maintain. So, I kept pushing my dream aside and tried to convince myself that the 9-to-5 grind was just part of the process. But that day, something inside me snapped. I realized that if I didn't take the risk now, I might never get another chance. I spent that evening researching ways to get started. I didn't have a lot of money saved up, and I didn't have any idea how to run a business, but I knew I had a passion for e-commerce and a knack for marketing. That was the seed of my idea, creating a niche online store that could combine my love for entrepreneurship and my marketing skills. The next morning, I handed in my resignation. It wasn't a dramatic departure, but it felt like I was leaping off a cliff into the unknown. My boss was shocked, but supportive. I remember he said, "I've seen a lot of people leave to chase their dreams, but few actually make it." At the time, I wasn't sure whether those words were encouraging or a warning, but I was determined to prove him wrong. The first few months were a blur of excitement and uncertainty. I spent every waking hour researching my niche, designing a website, and sourcing products. I had no formal training in business, so I learned everything on the fly: how to create a business plan, how to set up a website, how to deal with suppliers. My budget was tight, and I couldn't afford to make many mistakes. But that didn't stop me. I scoured forums, read books, and watched countless YouTube tutorials. I even took online courses about e-commerce and digital marketing. I remember my first sale. It came in the middle of the night. An email notification popped up on my phone, and there it was: "You've made a sale." I couldn't believe it. It wasn't much, just a $30 order for a product that I had spent weeks sourcing, but it was everything. It was validation. It was proof that my idea could work. I jumped out of bed, did a little dance, and texted my best friend immediately. She didn't understand what the big deal was at first, but I didn't care. To me, that $30 was the first step towards something bigger. Of course, things didn't stay easy. The early days were filled with a lot of trial and error. I'd spend hours tweaking my website, figuring out the best way to drive traffic, and trying to make the customer experience seamless. But I had no one to bounce ideas off of, and the isolation of working from home was both liberating and exhausting. I started to question myself. What if I had made the wrong decision? What if I wasn't cut out for this? Some days, the doubt was overwhelming. One of the biggest hurdles I faced was managing my time. As much as I loved the idea of being my own boss, the reality was that I had to wear every hat: marketing, customer service, finance, product sourcing, you name it. I had no team, no backup. It was just me, working around the clock. My friends and family would check in, but they didn't fully understand the grind I was going through. I couldn't talk to them about the sleepless nights, the stress of seeing my savings dwindle, or the constant feeling that I was on the edge of failure. But over time, things started to improve. I refined my marketing strategies, focusing heavily on social media and paid ads. I found a small but loyal customer base who believed in my products, and word of mouth started to spread. Slowly but surely, my sales increased. I remember the first month I made more than I did at my corporate job. It wasn't much, but it was a turning point. It was the first sign that my business was more than just a dream. As my business grew, so did the challenges. I had to hire my first employee, a customer service representative, to help manage the influx of orders. That was a big step, and it came with its own set of hurdles. Suddenly, I wasn't just responsible for my own success. I was responsible for someone else's livelihood. But I was also able to delegate tasks that were holding me back. I could finally focus on scaling the business, optimizing the supply chain, and building relationships with suppliers. A few years in, my company had grown to a point where I could start hiring more people. I brought in a marketing specialist, a warehouse manager, and even a part-time accountant. The team I had built was incredible, and we all shared the same vision: to create a brand that customers could trust and love. We weren't just selling products. We were creating an experience. We worked together, brainstormed ideas, and celebrated our wins. But with growth came new challenges, too. The larger we got, the more complicated things became. I had to learn how to manage people, how to scale sustainably, and how to keep the company culture intact as we grew. Now, several years into my entrepreneurial journey, I can look back and see how far I've come. I'm no longer just a one-person operation. I've built a company that generates six figures in revenue, employs a small team, and allows me to live the life I always dreamed of. But it wasn't easy. There were times when I doubted myself, when I considered giving up, and when I wondered if I had made the right decision. But I kept pushing through, learning from my mistakes, and adapting to new challenges. If I could go back and give my younger self advice, it would be this: the fear of failure is real, but it's not as big a threat as the fear of never trying. Yes, there will be sleepless nights, self-doubt, and times when you wonder if it's all worth it. But in the end, the lessons you'll learn, the people you'll meet, and the sense of fulfillment you'll get from building something from the ground up make it all worth it. I'll never forget the feeling of that first sale, the sense that I was on the path to something greater. I'm still learning, still growing, and still chasing that feeling every day. The journey isn't over. It's just beginning. I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. The idea of building something from scratch, taking risks, and watching it grow was always more appealing than a regular 9 to 5. But I didn't start with a grand plan. No, my journey started with a small, seemingly insignificant idea that grew into something much bigger than I ever expected. I grew up in a small town, and like many people from places like that, the idea of making it big was a distant dream. My family wasn't wealthy, but we weren't struggling either. My parents were both hard workers. My dad was a mechanic, and my mom worked at the local grocery store. They taught me the value of hard work and the importance of always doing my best. But honestly, that's all they really knew: hard work. There wasn't much talk about investing, business strategies, or anything that could help me understand what it really took to build something on my own. After high school, I didn't go straight to college. I figured I'd work for a bit, save up some money, and eventually figure out what I wanted to do. I ended up working in a couple of odd jobs: a server at a diner, a cashier at a retail store, and later, I managed a small team at a car rental place. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept me afloat. I didn't hate my job, but I was always thinking about something more. One day, I met a guy at the car rental place. Let's call him Tom. He was older than me, probably in his mid-40s, and had a few businesses under his belt. He'd worked in the real estate industry for years, but he'd also dabbled in a few side ventures. He wasn't wealthy by any means, but he was smart, and he had the kind of drive that inspired me. Over the course of a few months, we started talking about business ideas. I'd ask him questions, and he'd patiently explain things. He even gave me a couple of books to read, ones that taught me the basics of entrepreneurship, marketing, and sales. The more I learned, the more I realized that the world was full of opportunities. I didn't need a huge capital investment to get started. I just needed an idea and the willingness to take risks. But finding the right idea wasn't easy. At first, I tried to get into a few side hustles, selling used furniture, flipping electronics, even trying my hand at affiliate marketing. Nothing really stuck, and I started to feel discouraged. I kept hearing stories about people who started with nothing and built empires, but I couldn't seem to find my own success. That's when I had the breakthrough. One day, I was sitting at my apartment, scrolling through my phone, when I saw a post on a local community group. A person was offering to sell their old printer, but there was something off about it. The printer was clearly a commercial model, worth a lot more than they were asking for. I thought to myself, what if I could flip office equipment? What if I could find good deals and resell them for a profit? It was a small idea, but I decided to try it out. I started by buying office equipment in bulk from local businesses that were closing down or upgrading their technology. I'd find printers, computers, desks, and chairs for pennies on the dollar, then clean them up, refurbish them, and sell them online or through local ads. The first few months were slow, but I kept reinvesting the profits into more inventory. And slowly but surely, it started working. I made a few $100s here and there, but the key was I didn't spend much on marketing. I used free platforms like Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace to advertise my products. The real turning point came when I decided to scale up. I found a wholesaler who sold refurbished office equipment at a deep discount. It was a bit of a gamble, but I took out a small loan from the bank to buy a bulk order. This was the moment I either sank or swam. I started listing products everywhere, on eBay, Amazon, local classified ads, and even my own website. The demand was there, and within 6 months, I had paid off the loan and was making enough to support myself full-time. But the business wasn't without its challenges. There were days when I was working 16-hour shifts just to keep up with inventory and shipping. The logistics were a nightmare at times. I had to learn everything from scratch: how to negotiate with suppliers, how to handle returns, how to optimize my website for search engines, and how to manage customer service. But the hustle was worth it. Every challenge I faced was an opportunity to grow and learn. Over the next couple of years, I expanded into selling new office furniture, office chairs, and desks. I also started offering services like delivery and installation, which brought in even more revenue. By the time I was 28, my business had grown significantly. I hired a small team to help with the day-to-day operations, and we moved into a larger warehouse. Looking back, I realized something crucial. Entrepreneurship is not about having a perfect plan or knowing exactly where you'll end up. It's about starting, learning from your failures, and being willing to adapt. I had no idea that flipping office equipment would turn into a full-fledged business. But I learned how to manage, market, and grow, and I eventually became profitable enough to hire others and scale up further. The hardest part of this journey wasn't the long hours or the risks I took. It was the self-doubt. There were countless times when I questioned whether I was cut out for this. It's easy to look at successful entrepreneurs and think they had it easy, but the truth is, everyone starts somewhere. The key is to keep going even when it feels like you're stuck. Today, I have a successful business with a team of 10 people. We've expanded into new product categories, including home office solutions, and we're now starting to branch out into the commercial furniture space. I've also invested in a few other small businesses and continue to mentor other aspiring entrepreneurs. It's been a long and challenging road, but I wouldn't trade the experience for anything. If there's one piece of advice I can give, it's this: don't wait for the perfect opportunity. Sometimes, you have to create your own. Whether it's flipping equipment or launching a new product, take that first step and keep learning. The rest will fall into place if you keep pushing forward. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.